good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I had the opportunity
Hey, Jeff.
a few months ago to take part in a ceremony, and we started, and fall in with me if you happen to know the words to this. This is the day that the Lord hath made.
Rejoice.
Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Thank you. Well, welcome to all of those who have been before. Many of you didn't quite get with us last year. You're back this year. We're glad to see you, and we're glad to see the new folks. So it got a little bit hectic at the end there. We lost count. I think we've got somewhere over 95 that will pass through at one point or the other, if the ones that said they were coming really do come. Okay, for those that haven't been before, you can go out, anything that looks like a door, and keep going, and you'll get outside in case of an emergency. If you need to go to the women's room or the boys' room, you go out this door, turn right, go through those doors, and then depending whether you want to go left or right, go left or right, and read what the sign says on the wall. If you haven't found already, there's an agenda sheet inside the cover of your thing, and when you open the cover it says these are our sponsors, and the reason that's on top instead of the agenda sheet is I wanted to be able to honestly assure all the sponsors that people really did look at their sheet. For those who have been before, you know the way I work it. I'm just going to say this is JD and he's on. But if you want to know about him, then it's all down there on paper, and you'll find out, how great each person is. And this year I put some little different things in. Like I was talking to Leon, and he goes up to Vermont. And I just thought, I wonder where in the world you go in Vermont. I think it's like, 600,000 people in the whole state? On a good day? Maybe in the middle of summer. Anyway, I punched in, the little town that he had on there that he goes to. So that's, it's not a good picture, but it gives you an idea of how neat it is to look at Google Earth and fly around over the top of them and drop down on the highway and enjoy the woods of Vermont. We're shooting for 15-minute breaks, sometimes be a little less, a little bit more, and after Drew, the second presenter this afternoon, that would be a good time to get your last cup of coffee or whatever, because we won't have anything out until dinner time after that. Everybody that comes is an associate member of the Swamp Fox Murals Trail Society, and as such, you may be interested to know there's a website, ClarityMurals.com, and a lot of good stuff on it, and including the little video about the Liberty Trail that you'll hear more about, and we played it here a couple of years ago. That's on there. And I have to point out, because we don't have a bio for him, that Elwood Owens, raise your hand, Elwood, start up, take a bow, whatever. I was talking to him beforehand because I asked my dad one time, we were walking around the mountains of California, and I said, Dad, what was the job you enjoyed the most? What was the most fun? And I thought he had some neat jobs. And he looked at me, he just stopped and looked at me and just really, puzzled look on his face, and he said, a fun job. They were all work. And I asked Elwood because when you talk to him, here's a leading heart surgeon for about 25 years in Florence. And then I guess got tired of that and went to law school and did that for a while. And then I guess he got recruited by Joe Stooks to be his official photographer, and he's gotten interested in that. And he is now not only the official photographer for us, but he's also the official photographer, help me out, for the bluegrass band in Darlington, South Carolina.
Southeastern Bluegrass Association.
First Saturday night of every month. Parson John, you'll meet him tonight, and he is a real certified preacher, and he will be at our church, Jordan Church, if you are interested in coming and hearing a service similar to what you would have heard 250 years ago. And our church is about 6 miles south of town on South Carolina's 260, which runs right beside the courthouse. That would be 9 o'clock Friday morning, and I'll be mentioning it again. Dinner here tonight about 6:15. I believe the pictures for presenters, the SAR, the SR, the DAR will be tomorrow at lunchtime, and also the award for anyone who served during the Vietnam era and did not get a DAR pin yet. Carol will have those. Your name badge is obviously your entrance into any of our functions. And I have the full paper here. I'll lay it on my desk over there. But this is from Sue Adair. It's with heavy heart that I'm telling you that I've had to get Lutheran Hospital in to help me take care of Phil. So I don't think that Phil has missed, the Adairs have missed a symposium in 18 years. The books that are up in the back there, Eric Nathan has now got his 4th book, which is In Command of the Wolves, is that right? Close?
This one is Leader Wolves.
Leader.
Okay. And Dr. Christine Swagger, that famous author of stage, screen, and radio. Do I remember it right? Is here with us this year. And we had some books, Carol had some books in the closet that we'd gotten from Bob and Chris years ago. And so she asked her if she would be kind enough, if everybody would like any of her books, to autograph them, and knowing she will be overjoyed. Keith Godin is in the back with some maps. Bill Siggers has his books. Charles Baxley and David have theirs taken over back there. And Steve Smith will be here today with his book, which is a great book about the work he's done over around Snow Island. And interestingly enough, and I'll mention this when he's here and there's more people here, Carol and I heard him about 1995 or 6 at a church in Sumter, and the gist of his speech is now proven by his book. What we heard him say was they didn't have a camp on Snow's Island, and his book basically explains what he means. It's interesting to see that after we set up here today, someone came around and put "You can't have guns in there" signs on the door. So I don't know what group they think we are, but we thought that was sort of interesting. Just a couple miscellaneous comments. If you haven't looked at John Oler's book, you might want to get it. It keeps popping up in a lot of papers and so on and so forth. And one that about 3 years ago, we had a lady here, Beverly Inwall, and she wrote about Oscar. And she used John Oler's history and put it in Oscar's mouth, so to speak. He talks about it, he follows it through. And it's really a fun thing to read. And I finally think I figured out where I first got interested in Francis Marion. And when we packed up my dad's stuff, we came across a box of books. One of them is laying on the table over here, and that's a book by James Otis, 1899. And he talks, it's a story about a couple of kids running with Francis, being spies or something like that for Francis Marion. And I think that's probably what triggered my mind way back. I think I probably had the book in about somewhere between the 6th and 7th grade. After I found it at my dad's, I Googled and I found another one by Otis about the same thing. So they're here if you want to take a look at the old books, what the old guys thought about it when they were writing fiction about Francis Marion. Have my permission to play with them. And now, without further ado, the world famous traveler, J.D. Lewis.
Thank you, folks. How about a big hand for George and Carol for pulling this off? You guys are awesome, are you not? So as you can see up here, Francis Marion lived in the ripe old age of 63. A lot of us in this room have gone a little bit beyond that. Most of us have gone beyond that. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. So I also want to thank George and Carol for allowing us to open this presentation up to the life and times of Marion, not just focus solely on Marion. But as we know, during the 63 years of his life, South Carolina changed tremendously. And the purpose of this presentation is just to give you a quick smattering of what happened in his lifetime in the state of South Carolina, the colony and the state. So it's not all inclusive. It's mostly focused on the towns and the hamlets and the burgs. And you have to ask yourself, what the heck is a town? And Reverend Wood is here. I asked him this question 2 weeks ago. How many of you can name a town that was created in your lifetime in South Carolina? Reverend Wood came up with 2. Which 2 did you come up with?
Oh, I forgot them already.
Kankakee and North Myrtle Beach, South
Okay,
Carolina.
there we go. And North
So those 2 towns were created and established in our lifetime. Anybody else can name a town that was established in South Carolina in your lifetime? I couldn't. So I know that there have been. The point being is you're going to see in this presentation that during Marion's lifetime, close to 100 were established in his 63 years. And that's just to give you an idea of how much the colony, the state changed in 63 years. So, we'll move on. Here's what we're going to talk about. Back in the day of his birth, there were 4 counties, there were 12 parishes. By the time he died, there were 23 counties, 20 parishes, and 1 district. So you see, in 1732, we had a few towns, and you're going to see that there were, we'll start out with trading post, which is not a town. Little River had a trading post, it was not a town. And oh, by the way, Marion's brother lived there during the war. Georgetown was established in 29. Dorchester was established in 1696. Charlesbury in 1707. Ashley River Ferry Town, 1718. You've got Willtown, it started out as New London. You've got Beaufort, but it was replacing Stewartstown, which was started in 1684, destroyed by the Spanish in 1686. Then, of course, you've got Charlestown, Mount Pleasant. There were 50 settlers that established this area in 1696. I've already said Dorchester, but the key is that Dorchester, that was established in 1696, fizzled by the American Revolution. So the town that now exists in Dorchester is not in the same location. So that's at the time of Marion's birth. You can see that most of the settlement, of course, was along the coast in 1732. There were pockets out here, and we're going to see why there were pockets that grew quickly. For that, Charleston. Of course, Charleston was settled in 1670 in South Carolina, but it was settled on this side of the Ashley River, over here. This is where it is now. So the first 10 years it was over here. And I went too fast. And as you can see on this map, there's where it was, and there's where it is. There were 62 lots on about 80 acres, and in 1680 it was removed to Oyster Point, and this part just fizzled. Now there are people living there today, but that's where the original Charlestown.
I'm living there.
Pardon me?
I'm living on the original plat.
You're living there right now.
Right now. Well,
Can we all come visit?
absolutely.
All right, we'll be there.
Bring the wine and you're welcome.
Thank you. Y'all heard it. Bring the wine. We're welcome. All right. So this is the first lithograph map of Charlestown, 1671. This was published in a book, and this plaque clearly shows that Charlestown was on this side of the river in 1671. The next map I could find printed was 1704. That's a long time. But the bottom line is that in 1672, they wanted to lay it out on Oyster Point. The Grand Council did, but it didn't happen. It was on December 17, 1679, that the Lord Proprietors instructed that this is where we want Charlestown. So it got moved in 1679, 1680, and the rest is history. Okay, so now we'll go through it fairly quickly. There was Charlestown, plus 8 more towns, 2 trading posts, 3 forts. 1 was destroyed via Stewartstown, and 3 were abandoned by Francis Marion's death, such as Ashley River Town, a couple of others. So you look at the list, New London became Willtown, and it continued for quite a long time. Stewartstown did not. Dorchester, the church moved in 1750 to Georgia, and the town sort of kept on going to the Rev War. I don't know whether it evaporated just before or just after. Mount Pleasant, 1696. Charlesbury, Beaufort, trading post, Ashley River Ferry Town. So while we're there, I got something to hand out. Pass these around and look at it. During colonial times, who was authorized to grant a town? It was not the General Assembly. South Carolina had a General Assembly. We had a royal governor after 1719, and we had an executive council. For everybody that don't remember, here's a refresher on your South Carolina history. The Lords Proprietors had an eldest guy called the Palatine, and he got to appoint the governor. The 7 other Lords Proprietors appointed deputies, and the deputies got to come over to Charleston and guide and advise the governor. and give the finger to the General Assembly whenever they wanted to. So the Executive Council was the only board that was authorized to grant a town. So all towns prior to the Revolution were granted by, not the General Assembly, by the Executive Council. And how they got approved is lost to history because most of the notes of the Executive Council are no longer in existence. But all these towns that you see here were approved by the Executive Council. All right, so in 1730, Royal Governor Johnson created the Township Act, and you see he wanted to create towns out in the middle of the state to act as a way to create settlement and to ward off Native Americans. So all these townships were created, and they got named something and then they got renamed. Frederick Township became Fredericksburg Township, was established in 1730, but it wasn't settled until 32. It was the nucleus for the town of Pine Tree Hill, which later became Camden. Congaree Township was renamed Saxgotha. You've got Amelia Township, Edisto Township, which became Orangeburg, New Windsor, Perrysburg, Williamsburg, Kingstown. You've got the Queensboro Township and the Wells Tract created in 1734. And it was in the 1730s that people started arriving at these places. They really didn't create a town, they just sort of settled. So they were called townships, but there wasn't a town really. However, when you get to 1740, we now have 21 or 22 new towns. And this is why I'm going fast, because George says I talk too long. So here we go, Congaree became, and it fizzled, Pine Tree became Camden, Amelia became the town of Amelia, Perrysburg, but they had a post office in 1822, it closed in 1848. Radnor, 1734, you can see in one of your handouts that it was created as a fair or a market town. Now the General Assembly could grant fair and market towns. And that's what they did. And there's all of them that were granted, I passed around so you can see that was done by the General Assembly. This made it a little bigger. So I'm going to get off on a tangent here real quick on Radnor. The town of Radnor is named after a town in Wales. Wales in the United Kingdom, Wales on the western side of the country. I traced my family, my Lewis lineage, back to the town of Radnor in the early 1600s. So in 2006, I went over to London, leased a flat for 6 months, did research at the UK archive, went over to Wales, did research there, said, I'm going to find Radnor, the town of Radnor in Wales. And I drove over to Wales. Of course, they drive on the wrong side of the road. I had a hard time shifting with my left hand, but bottom line is I made it there. And I found out there's two towns here called Radnor. There's Old Radnor and New Radnor. And I'm going like, dang, they're 5 miles apart. New Radnor was created in 1510. Old Radnor was created in 930 AD. The town had a church that dated back to the 700s. And when I got there, they had a brick church that was built in the 950s. And I found my family cemetery. So I found where the Lewis homestead was. And the towns of Radnor were in a county called Radnorshire. It's been defunct now, it's now called Powys. But that's where my family originated. So this town right here was created by Sir Edmund Bellinger, and the town of Radnor was created right there. In 1734, he had to be a Welshman. Well, there's no other reason why he would name it Radnor, except that he was a Welshman. So then we have Williamsburg, New Windsor, and Edmundsbury. And guess what? Edmundsbury was named after Edmund Bellinger. Like, why wouldn't it Bellingerberry? It was Edmundsbury. 1750, we now added Moortown, Jacksonboro, 96, and Chirraw. And as you see,
folks are spreading further inland. And in the 1750s, folks started coming down from Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and other places to settle in the interior parts of South Carolina. You've got Scots-Irish, you've got English, and French Huguenots, and soon you have a lot of German Lutherans coming in. 1760, you now have 28 towns. We've added Moncks Corner. So we got a big contingent here today from Berkeley County. Huzzah! Berkeley County. Huzzah! So Moncks Corner started out in one location, and it moved about 5 miles, and the current location is not where the first one was. I don't know why it happened, but it happened. And a lot of folks seem to think that it was named after one of the Lord's proprietors, George Monk, but it wasn't. It was named after a gentleman that lived there named Thomas Monk. And he was a fairly well-to-do man. He created a market, a store, and it got named after him, not after the Lord proprietor. So, Lancaster, wow, as early as 1756, Long Bluff in 1760. And at one point in time, Long Bluff became the district capital or district seat of the Charles district. But as you see now, roads are being developed. This is called the Fall Line Road. It was started in the 1750s. Then we've got the Great Wagon Road, which eventually came down to Augusta. And then you had the Upper Road. Now, of course, you had the King's Highway, and that one goes way back to the 1680s. That's why the title of this is All Roads Lead to Charlestown, but it is really a misnomer. Okay. Going on to 1769, we see that they created districts, and these were called judicial districts because everybody got tired of having to go to Charleston to settle all their deeds and wills or what have you. So they came up with the District Act in 1768. It was disapproved by Parliament, but in 69 it was approved by the Crown, and they set up courthouses in Georgetown, Charleston, Beaufort, Beaufort, Orangeburg, Camden, Cheraw, Long Bluff was where it first went to, and then the 96 area. And as you see, a lot of new settlement coming along. But in that decade, not a lot of towns. So we see in 1770, we now have Boonesborough Township, New Bordeaux, Granby, London Borough, New Rochelle, Statesburg became Stateburg, McCrady's Crossroads became Graham's Crossroads, became Lynch's Lake, became Lake City. So, as you start to see, new roads are being built into the interior and not just these big fall towns. But the towns, all this is happening in Marion's lifetime. How much he's aware of all these changes, I don't know, but he was in the French and Indian War. He was an officer. He was also had gotten into the legislature after the state was formed. I don't remember whether he was in it before. I don't think he was. But the bottom line was he was a very well-to-do man, not super rich. I think he knew what was going on, and I think he would have been proud of what all happened. So you see, by 1780, we're now up to 35 towns, and we have Brailsford, we've got St. James. This is the same location as the much earlier French Jamestown. French Jamestown was authorized real early in 1696, early 1700s, but they didn't do anything with it. St. Stephen's became Pineville, then St. Stephen's Depot, and then became St. Stephen's. So back where it originally started. Brailsford is over here. And as you can see, go on. 1785, they had the big county act. They established counties all over the state, and they wanted to have a courthouse in each county, so they were going to get election districts as well as judicial districts. But the people along the coast hated them. The people along the coast liked their old nomenclature. So Liberty County eventually became Marion County. Kingston County eventually became Horry. Williamsburg, ditto, stayed. Wynyard County died. Washington County died. Marion County was here. It did not happen. They established it legally, but they never built a courthouse or anything else. Berkeley County was over here. Colleton County was just a small little speck. Charleston County was even smaller. Bartholomew County didn't make it. Shrewsbury, Lincoln, Hilton, none of these made it. All of these made it. Because it was settled by people who had no ties to Charleston or the coast. But they were established. They tried, and a couple of them started making courthouses, but they decided, nah, we don't want it. We'll just go to Georgetown, we'll go to Charleston, we'll go to Beaufort. 1786 to 90, they added Greenville County and Pendleton County. This was, all of this right here was Pendleton County. So you see the names here are all recognizable, but they kept the districts. What's that got to do with towns? Well, we start getting into, every county started creating towns. Each of these counties that made it, Newberry had a town. Everybody got real creative with their courthouses. Newberry Courthouse, Norwich Courthouse, Abbeville Courthouse, Pendleton Courthouse, Spartanburg. Oh, they didn't put courthouse at the end of there. Union Courthouse. It was brilliant. Ferguson's Crossroads became Yorkville much later. Chesterfield Courthouse. So all these towns were created in the 1780s, about 6-7 years before Marion died, so he knew about it. So as you can see, there were a whole bunch of new towns that got started in the 1780s because of the new counties that got done. But you'll see, none of them are really down here. Coosawhatchie became a county, judicial seat over Beaufort district, and Beaufort had to, they were ticked, and they said, give it back to us. They gave it back to us. Walterboro was established, and then Gilesboro, which became the town of Marion, was established. The city of Janesville was established in 1785. That was the original county seat for Clarendon County. Clarendon County was wiped out in 1800. It wasn't resurrected until 1855 with the town of Manning. That's the 1785. 91, we got two new districts. The Pinckney district, so they took out part of Camden district. The Washington district took out part of the 96th district. And we added Kershaw County, and Spartan County became Spartanburg. But all these old towns, all these old counties along here were totally abandoned. So this is during his lifetime. This is from 1792 to 99. You had the Washington district, and then it became abolished, it became the Pendleton district again. And then you had Camden reduced, Girard reduced, Sumter district added. We have two new counties. Marion was named in 1798 after his death, and Salem County was added right before his death. And as I mentioned, Coosawhatchie was the county seat of Beaufort district for just a short while. All right, we're getting close to the end here. So as you see now, in 1791 to 1799, there were 23 counties, 20 parishes in one district. I didn't talk a lot about parishes earlier, but they were started in 1706 for the Anglican Church. Typically, when you create a parish, there's a parish church. And then the parish church becomes a town. Well, South Carolina only halfway embraced the Anglican Church. And there were certain parts that loved it and other parts that didn't. And not every parish built a church. So therefore, there was not a town in every parish like you would expect. The interesting fact is they abolished the Anglican Church when they created their constitutions. South Carolina had three. from 76, 78, 1790. They got rid of the Anglican Church as a requirement, but they kept all the parishes. They kept the parishes as an election district until the Civil War. So whenever you look up to find out who all represented South Carolina from the American Revolution to Civil War, you find that you have representatives from Chesterfield County and you have representatives from St. John's Colleton Parish. And you're like, what do we do that for? They did it. By 1795, there were 50 towns, hamlets left. That's not including the one that fizzled. And as you can see, Pinckneyville was added, Oconee Station, Ticketsville, Salem the town, Nielsen's Ferry. Sorry, I have to make this note. You all hear about the battle in the American Revolution at Nelson's Ferry, and that's where it was. But the name of the ferry was Nielsen's Ferry, and all the people that reported it in their battles and their history, they kept the name Nelson. It's like, no, it was really Nielsen Ferry, and it was owned by a man named Nielsen. And guess what? It got a post office before Charleston did. Nielsen's Ferry was one of the first post offices in South Carolina in 1793. They got a post office when they got set up. So it lasted, the post office there closed in 1824. Salem evaporated. There were two other incarnations. Pickensville became the town of Easley, and I think pretty much it as of his life. This shows you what it was in 1800. And then as we take questions, I'll flip through and show you, here's what we can find. All this information is in my website. Some hamlets I've got only a paragraph, some of them for the city of Charleston. If you were to print it out, it's probably 30 pages. So if I could find a plat for it, it's there. If I couldn't, if you can find one, send it to me, I'll add it. But there's Georgetown in 1729. The people that live in Georgetown claim the town wasn't started until 1734, but I have found many references proving that it was 29, including this map here. And then we've got, there's Georgetown 34. Okay, questions? Yes, sir. Thank you.
What, in the early days, it's like a skirmish or a battle, whether you shoot a bullet or you don't. What's the definition of town in the early days?
I was really hoping nobody would ask that.
I always like to find your soft spots.
Yeah, you're good at it. He found out that I was having a breathing problem a couple of years ago. It turned out I needed a pacemaker. Anyway, towns. There was no real definition except that it had a store. In the early colonial days, if there was a store there, it could be called a town. So they had to they had to sell stuff or what have you. Typically, it was at a crossroad or at a ferry landing or what have you. But there had to be a store. And by the 1730s, when the Crown took over, it had to have a layout of town, a plat like I'm showing here. It had to have a pre-approved plat by the Executive Council. So in the 1670 to 1730s, just had to have a market for a store. 1730 on, it had to have a plat approved by the Executive Council. We got a few more. There's Edmondsbury, there's Boonesboro, Hillsboro. As you can see, I got quite a few, but I don't have them. Yes, sir, Mr. Allison.
JD, was Radnor, South Carolina, not Wells? Was it about where, Yamasee, or what was it close to, and when did it disappear?
Well, I have
Just happened to have a plan.
So as you can see, it was a true town with a plat in the 1730s. But when it fizzled, I think I wrote it down here.
It is on maps until 1941. I found it on maps until 1941.
What is it near, what is it near?
So here is where it was, and as you can see, it's right at the county line, just across the county. I don't remember off the top of my head what it is now, but I can find out for you and let you know after.
JD, Radnor is where Highway 17 bridge crosses the Columbia River. Edmondsbury is where the 17 bridge crosses the Asheville River. They're about 10 miles apart of that.
I love my Berkeley County guys.
And there's, archaeological sites there.
Now I don't have to look it up. Thank you, sir. Anything else? All right, folks. I did it in record time. Yay.
You deserve it.
I always deserve to be shot. Oh my goodness, Charles Baxter is coming. It's David Rose.
Oh, for clustering here around Chris.
All right.
A number of years ago, the Chamber of Commerce here came up with some awards for various things. One of them was Ambassador of the Year, and that was sponsored by our then Representative Alex Harmon. He passed, and his wife took over. She continued to award. She passed. They had both done a lot for Carol and I, so we took over that award. And the last couple of years, we haven't had it. But as those were here the last couple of years, we decided that we ought to do it for the trail symposium. And so we have the Ambassador of the Year for the symposium. The first year it was Charles and David. Last year it was Chris and Bob Swagger. And this year it is J.D. Lewis. And the $1,000 does not go to J.D. Lewis. It goes to the Symposium, $500 in honor of J.D., and it goes to the South Carolina Battleground Trust, $500 in honor of J.D. And here's a quick picture of